Arundhati, just while we're on this subject of the Indian left, this last election not just saw the defeat of the Congress party, and deservedly, in my opinion. The one wished there'd been other people who defeated them, but it also saw an effective wiping out of the traditional Indian left. And this is something new because despite everything, despite the fall of the Soviet Union, despite people moving away, they had maintained some representation. That is now almost gone.
Yeah. But that's very, I don't know, whether it's a sad thing or not, because I don't know whether they, really deserve to be called the left anymore. They had moved so far away from what the left is supposed to mean or be. You see, in India, the left is not just the parliamentary left.
No.
Or there's an idea of let's say of material justice, of social justice, flawed idea, as I said, which never managed to deal with caste, which is the central engine that runs India. But still, when that discourse gets wiped out, as it was wiped out all over, Pakistan and Afghanistan and in all the Islamic or Muslim countries, then you are in a very, very dangerous space. And I'm not just talking about the party, but I'm talking about that way of thinking,
Yeah. But now the question is, what will fill the vacuum? And here, what is happening in Europe is quite interesting, because all the big communist parties fell. The Italian Communist Party transformed itself into a neoliberal party, and its leader says the hero he admires the most is Tony Blair. This is the Italian Democrats who want to be like the American Democrats. In France, the party lost its membership. Basically, it's now reduced to nothing. These were big mass parties. And similarly, social democratic parties or the left within them virtually ceased to exist. But in a number of countries, like Greece and Spain in particular, but not just there, they're the most dramatic countries, you have the emergence of a new layer of young activists challenging global capitalism and challenging the way in which democracy has been used. I just want to read to you, I read it again this morning, and it's during the big occupations of the squares in Spain. You had a television journalist coming up to a young woman. They called themselves the indignados, the angry, the outraged, the indignants. And he came up to a woman and he said to her, say whatever you want, but please don't question democracy. And Beatriz Garcia, that was her name, replied, yes, we question this democracy because it fails to support popular sovereignty. The markets impose decisions for their own benefit, and the parties in parliament are not standing up to this global fact. Neither in our country or elsewhere are they fighting to put an end to financial speculation, whether in currency or in sovereign debt. Yes, we question this democracy because the parties in power do not look out for the collective good, but for the good of the rich, because they understand growth as the growth of businessmen's profits, not the growth of social justice, redistribution, public services, access to housing and other necessities, because the parties in power are concerned only for their continuation in office, because no politician has to live with what they legislate for their subjects: insecurity, mortgage debt, uncertainty. We question this democracy because it colludes with corruption, allowing politicians to hold a private post at the same time as a public office, to profit from privileged information, to step into jobs as business advisors after leaving office, making it very profitable to be a politician. Yes, We question this democracy because it consists in an absolute delegation of decision-making into the hands of politicians that are nominated in closed lists and to whom we have no access of any kind. Nor is there proportionality between votes and seats. We question this democracy because it is absurd that the only way to punish a party is to vote for another one with which one does not agree. We question this democracy because the parties in power do not even comply with the social provisions of their own constitutions. Excuses are not good enough for us. We do not want to choose between actually existing democracy and the dictatorships of the past. We want a different life, real democracy now. And of course, the television guy, what could he say? He'd never heard this stuff before. And it's this mood that has created the Podemos, We Can party, which has suddenly jumped from nowhere right to the top of the opinion polls today on a very radical platform. And I was thinking that if things carry on like this, could this be replicated in India, of course in different forms, and something emerges to fill the vacuum now that's left with the collapse of the left?
See, I think that what's very interesting about India is that this statement, now people have been saying this, the social movements have been saying this for years, they understood it very well. And the fact is that people, if you look at the fact that even, early days in Latin America, democracies were being toppled because they were dangerous, right? And now wars are being fought to install democracies, supposedly, because they have taken democracy into the workshop and they've figured it out, right? So in a country like India, I keep saying, all the institutions of democracy have been hollowed out and replaced, and you keep watering them and you keep believing in them, and yet they function, exactly in the ways they're not supposed to. And we have the rituals of democracy in place, the elections and so on, which is better than not having any rituals. The point is that, of course, this happened in India, with the whole Anna Hazare movement, the anti-corruption movement. But I was one of the skeptics very, very much in the beginning of it all.
Me too.
Because, because it was a dangerous thing, I mean, one of the reasons I will say that the victory of these elections happened the way they did was because of that. I really believe this. Because for 40 days, Tariq, the Hindu right was on the streets undercover, supporting this anti-corruption movement. And, if you saw what was going on, and the media, this corporate-owned media, 40 days of carpet coverage, day and night. And it happened at a very interesting time. It happened at a time when there was this, what is known as the 2G scandal about, broadband, auctioning of the broadband. And for the first time in many years, the corporate corruption and lobbying had been exposed. Suddenly, the corporates who were seen even by the middle class to be good guys had been exposed in this. But when this anti-corruption movement happened, it trained its guns straight back onto the old evil politicians. And the corporates joined in, and the media joined in, and they just completely just turned the gaze back onto the old, tired old thing about, oh, politicians are corrupt and so on. And there was this continuous attack on, of course, just the government, not even all politicians, just Congress, not BJP, because they were all behind it and supporting it. But what happened was, very, very sadly, according to me, that a lot of the social movements who had been saying this kind of thing for years, because corruption is huge, and they joined this, right? And soon after that, there was a falling out, and of course, Arvind Kejriwal decided to stand for elections. And these social movements and the leaders of them who had built up a lot of legitimacy decided to stand for elections. And it was crazy because now you're saying, you know how elections are fought. You know how much money it takes. You don't have it. It's their pitch, it's their umpire, it's their wickets, it's their bat. And you are not going to win, but you're going to lose your legitimacy. So it took the wind out of the sails of these social movements in a way which was very disturbing to me. And of course, when a mass of people begins to build up, when the anger comes, there are many of these corporations who run NGOs, many of these, I mean, old foundations who know how to vacuum up this anger. They've done it from the time of the civil rights movement. They've done it in apartheid. They've done it everywhere.
It in Eastern Europe.
They've done it in Eastern Europe. They've done it in Indonesia. And many of those same players are here, you know, and in India is awash with these NGOs whose whole job is to diffuse anger or deflect it down a blind alley. So what happens eventually is this anger, it turns on itself, or it turns into a kind of, you know, it becomes depoliticized, but it becomes criminal, or it becomes, which they can deal with, you know. And in India, the prisons are full of people accused of sedition, of anti-government activity, all for saying this, for saying what you just read out. But they've been saying it for years, you know. They know the score. You say that you're going to develop, you're going to build dams, you're going to build mines, you're going to give us jobs. But it's been 25 years of this and there are no jobs, you know. It's what you call jobless growth. And there isn't any space in the imagination, politically, culturally. Even if you look at Bollywood films, you know, I mean, in the 70s you had Amitabh Bachchan acting in Mard or Coolie, or, you know, Main Sadak Ka Keeda Hoon, or you know, he was the angry young man from the slums.
Yeah.
Today, he only lives in villas.
But returning to Indian politics, if nothing emerges from the collapse of the left or even the Congress to challenge what's going on, it's an incredibly depressing situation, Arundhati, especially that, you know, you've written about the peasant rebellions, which are called Maoist and of course involve some Maoists, but they had a very heroic character, in my opinion. They were the only people in India fighting for the poor and challenging the power of the state. And a friend of mine told me in Delhi once that he said that in the early days, when the Congress first came back to power, they said, let's see if we can talk to these guys, and they sent senior civil servants to Andhra Pradesh who said, we want to talk. And these old leaders came out and talked to them, and it was described to me as this. They said that they were expecting, you know, for them to make impossible demands and all that. And the civil servants said that these guys were so knowledgeable, so educated, that they came with all Congress Party manifestos. They came with the Indian Constitution. And when we asked them, what do you want? They pointed to clauses in the Indian Constitution and Congress manifestos and say, all we want is that you implement this. And all we want is that you implement the Constitution. And they said that yes, let's start with that, and then we can have peace.
But then they were killed.
They were then killed when they went back?
Yeah, they were killed, you know, decimated. And this is the thing. I mean, I've also written about this, you know, the fact that you're just saying implement the Constitution, and that seems to be an act of terrorism today to say that, you know. But see, no, I mean, I just like to correct you on one thing, which is, it's not just the Maoist movement in the forest that is, you know, there's a kind of landscape, and I keep saying there has to be a diversity of resistance, like a biodiversity of resistance, you know, inside the forest. You can't go on a hunger strike or do some Gandhian tactics when 1,000 troops come and burn your village and rape your women. Equally, outside in the plains, it's hard to have armed struggle because there's no shelter, you know. So rather than look at these things ideologically, we should be looking at them tactically. And I would say it's immoral for people in Delhi to sit and advise the Adivasi in the forest when his house or her house is being burnt and they are being raped and murdered, to say, oh, you must be Gandhian about it. They should be allowed to decide what they want to be. But so there is a diversity of resistance of all kinds. There was, and this is what I'm saying. I'm so worried about that was in some ways co-opted and reduced. But the way things move now, Tariq, I mean, you never know. I'm not. I mean, in any case, it's not in my DNA to sit around moping and feel gloomy.
Yeah.
I'm sure something will happen because the level of insanity and absurdity that's going on. I mean, you have a prime minister who's saying the solution to climate change is yoga, and the Hindus discovered plastic surgery. How else could you have an elephant god? I mean, there's a limit to how and to try and posit this as common people's knowledge is so wrong, because common people are wise people,
Exactly.
and they are trying to put their idiocy as some kind of the common man,
No, they're trying to institutionalize ignorance from the top. When ordinary people have much sharper minds than that.
Ignorance and idiocy and posture as if this is the real India, which is false. The real India does consist of very wise people who have dealt with a lot of things in their history,
Arundhati, let's just come to the question of social movements in India. You, of course, were involved in the Narmada business. You know this better than almost anyone else I know. What has happened to them now? Are they still carrying on? To what extent and where?
See, the Narmada movement, of course, I mean, the Narmada river, they were building this series of large dams that were just turning the river into a kind of step reservoir. And of course, when they start doing this, there are these policy documents that say people will be resettled, communities will be settled together, everyone will get land for land. Nothing of that happened, And now the dams are built. Some of the dams are irrigating less land than they submerged. Some of them are incomplete. But the submergence has happened. In Gujarat, in the main dam, the canals have not been built. People have just been destroyed. They now trying to distribute some, cash compensation, which is destroyed people. I mean, they'll give the money to the men who drink it or buy motorcycles, and in 3 days the money is finished. These are peasant communities who don't know how to necessarily, they're not businessmen. So, in fact, one of the times I got hauled up for contempt of court and subsequently jailed was because I said that, to give Adivasi cash compensation is like paying a Supreme Court judge his salary in fertilizer bags.
I remember that.
And it's true. I mean, what do you do? But those places have been destroyed, and now they have plans to build hundreds of dams up in the northeast in states like Arunachal Pradesh. And the dams are given to like, oh, here one dam to my school friend, another dam to my wife's brother-in-law, and just the process of building it involves so much money. I mean, forget about the devastation that environmentally it causes, and actually the trouble is now, Tariq, that I mean, personally, I'm so near this place where I understand that there's a certain level of futility in putting forward these rational arguments, because what do you do? I mean, Naomi Klein writes a whole book on statistics and everything on climate change, and Modi says, no, we'll just do yoga. What do you do? I mean, the battle will be fought, and you don't know how it will be fought. Of course, it will be fought at some point, because, like for example, Manmohan Singh, when he came to power in 2004, Congress Party, they signed something like 200 or 300 memorandums of understanding in the forests of central India. And when they couldn't be actualized, they deployed the paramilitary in the army, and you know, now they are, so you're seeing in a way the poorest people in the world giving the richest corporations the hardest time, you know, and they understand. I mean, people understand the role NGOs have played, these foundations have played, and how they are being destroyed now. The movement in the forest is not going to be destroyed just by the Sri Lanka style of genocide, but by intelligence, by spies, by breaking it down in you know, just going on, because the state can wait and wait and wait, you know.
And the other thing which you've written about a great deal, and which is in both these books in different ways, is that now, given India's position in the world, criticism of India in the West, the Western media, the Western political elites, is virtually non-existent. So things which happen, similar things, bad things that happen in countries they're not happy with, they impose sanctions, they do this, they're denounced constantly in the Western media. But atrocities can carry on in India, in the forests, as we were just talking about, or in Kashmir, or in Manipur, where the rapes had become awful and unbearable. And no one outside really sits up and talks. The image is the world's largest democracy.
Well, I mean, it was interesting. The world went crazy about that December gang rape and murder,
Yes.
right? But when that happened, they still don't. I mean, every journalist that passes through Delhi wants to talk to me about rape, as if I'm the Ministry of Rape or something, you know. But they don't want to. They don't want to remember that, for example, when Modi was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, hundreds of Muslim women were gang raped and burnt on the streets. When Reuters asked him whether he regretted what happened in 2002, he said, even if when there was a pogrom organized by goons supported by government, police and all that against the Muslim community, he said, you know, even if my car runs over a dog, I'll regret it. If a puppy comes under the wheels of my car, I'll regret it, you know. That was the answer. So the thing is that, of course, you know, this form of capitalism that India has adopted, like I said, it's, you know, this cross ownership of businesses, this kind of full spectrum domination. No, people don't want to talk about it because it's being seen as the new investment destination. I mean, I saw a woman, a feminist from the left in America, writing on the Huffington Post about how Modi was a feminist, right? Because he had talked about rape. The man who, when he was asked about female malnutrition, said, oh, that's because these women are diet conscious, right? So, but of course, you know, people like me will be already, I mean, there was a big article yesterday in the Observer, you know, she's so shrill and she has no arguments, yes, kind of thing. But that's to be expected because, you know, you have to understand that you're not, you know, everyone's not going to just stand up and applaud. These are huge things, huge forces at play, and if you're going to, you know, set yourself against them in any way, you are going to be.
But you know, what do you say to young people, for instance, who I know you talk to non-stop, who say 20-somethings, and they say, what should we do?
Well, I would say, first of all, the main thing is that, you know, you really first of all should understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And once you understand what's going on, you can decide what you want to do. But many people don't understand. You know, it's not just a question of you know, marching against the war on a weekend or something. And how do we find it? It's very hard for me to tell people what to do. I mean, firstly, I'm quite bad at that. But like sometimes I say, I think maybe I should teach a course on how to read a newspaper. You know, like who's funding this paper? Why is it saying this? You know, why has it taken this angle on this and not on that? You know, it's very difficult for young people to know how to decode things. It's not so simple anymore that, you know, you just mass in the square. Even when people mass in the square, sometimes they're being manipulated, as we saw in the anti-corruption movement.
Exactly.
You know, I said, what do you mean by corruption? After all, when big corporations involve themselves in corruption, is called lobbying. But in India, where most of the population is illegitimate, either it's living where it shouldn't be living or working where it shouldn't be working, because corruption is really about, it's really about the lack, I mean, the distribution of power and powerlessness. And unless you address that, if you're a slum dweller who's selling samosas on the street by paying a cop a certain amount of money, this middle class guy is going to come and says, corrupt, move the slum and move to samosa seller, you know. So in some ways, corruption is a good thing. Corruption is how people survive, you know. And to look at it just as a disease is counterproductive. You have to look at how it happens. It's about the unequal distribution of power, and power will never be equally distributed, but you have to minimize the inequality as much as you can. But so for young people to just mass arrive at this anti-corruption movement and hold up banners and think they're being cool, I mean, for me, all I can do, I mean, I'm not a politician, you know, I cannot go and, it's not in me. Like, I think I'm better at annoying people than getting their vote. So I don't know how to say it, but for me it's very important that you understand before you do something. You know, you understand deeply what the score is, you know. You can, otherwise you can turn resistance and politics into an art project. You know, everyone can go around with the right T-shirt and the right scarf and be cool and all of that, but mainly they have stolen our language. Even if you look at the language that they are developing, these NGOs, you know, it's so scary. I was once at a kind of conference. I had just gone to wreck the proceedings, really, where everyone's talking about privatization of water and so on. And I said, you know, it was supposed to be a panel of writers. I was the only writer. The others were just writers of policies and so on. And I said, you know, real writers, we spend our lives trying to close the gap between language and thought. And you spend your life trying to develop a language that masks thought.
Exactly.
You know, and they have stolen our language. Now, I'm not meaning Urdu or French or English. I mean just the way language is used, that has been stolen. You know, all of us are being flattened into kind of formatted, you know. I mean, you have privatized universities now in India where they actually call students clients.
What?
Yeah.
They haven't done that here so far.
This is the biggest scam, right? That the privatization of health and education is the big one now in India. So it's very frightening, the withdrawal of the state, and then this, you know, these private players come in and what's going to happen? What's going to happen?
What it does is it makes inequality the central pillar of the society, because
it makes the inequality the central pillar, and then everybody who has the worst intentions talks about you know, the poor as if they are so concerned about them, you know, and then they tell you, but you hate the poor, but you know, you don't want them to have flat screen TVs and mobile phones. I mean, like when I went to the forest where this battle is unfolding in India, I met the superintendent of police before I went in. And I mean, of course, he didn't know I was going. And he told me that, ma'am, you know, I have told my superior officers that we will never win this war militarily. The way we will win it is if we put a television in every Adivasi's home, because the trouble with these people is they don't understand greed, you know.
Arundhati, thank you very much. It's been lovely talking to you as always. Thank you for coming.